So hi everybody, thank you for joining me. My name is Robert Jokes. I'm a product manager for content and workflow solutions with Sony. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about my product specifically. It's called NavigatorX. It's a content management and workflow orchestration solution, but I'll also be touching on some other solutions that work with NavX so that you can really build a nice asset management system, whether you're on-prem, in the cloud, or maybe doing a hybrid scenario. So first, Sony's Intelligent Media Services is actually a full suite of services. NavigatorX is one of the solutions under there. We've got some other camera solutions, we've got cloud-based solutions, but basically we've got solutions that cover pretty much your entire digital supply chain. And the point there is we're trying to simplify your digital supply chain so you're not piecemealing a bunch of different solutions, paying a lot of money to integrate those solutions together. Almost all of our intelligent media solutions integrate with each other so that you have those touch points. So with NavigatorX specifically, I want to show you guys what an example system setup would look like. So NavigatorX is primarily an on-premise asset management workflow orchestration solution. So actually what you're seeing here at the bottom on-premise is this is potentially multiple NavigatorX sites. So you could have, one site here in Virginia, you could have one maybe in LA, somewhere else, and you can cross-cluster those. That way you can do federated search amongst each other, transfer content between each other. So you could potentially have multiple sites on-premise that are all working together. NavigatorX has hooks into on-premise infrastructure, so if you already have investments into maybe archive infrastructure like our own optical disk archive, or maybe LTO with something like a Zendata, StoreNext, or SGL, you can incorporate those archive workflows into your NavigatorX workflows. On the transcode side of things, we include our own Sony Catalyst software-based transcoder in the core. We also support FFmpeg on the software side, and on the hardware side, we support Vantage and Rosette. So you can leverage those third-party transcoders to do things like proxy generation or transcode for distribution. And then we also support on the QC side, Baton. On the accelerated transfer side, we support Signiant, Aspera. So you can incorporate all of those solutions into your workflows, and that way you have NavigatorX as the central point for not only your assets, your asset repository to find your assets, manage your assets, but it's also going to do your workflow orchestration across any of those devices that may be a part of your workflow. So that's the on-premise portion, and then we also can work up in the cloud. And there's two ways that we can do that today, and I'll show you guys some hands-on of how this actually works. But you can actually deploy NavigatorX in the cloud if you wanted to do it, maybe host it on private cloud or maybe even in the public cloud. You can host an instance of NavigatorX in the cloud. The benefit there would be that if you do have multiple sites like you see here, rather than giving someone VPN access into your network and some of the security issues that may arise there, you can actually have the instance of NavigatorX hosted up in the cloud, and you can securely cross-cluster those. Your folks that are outside of your VPN could connect to the instance that's up in the cloud, and now you have full federated search of everything on premise, even across multiple sites, but you also have control of your on-premise infrastructure. So from the cloud, you could actually kick off archive workflows to an LTO library that's actually sitting somewhere on-premise, or even retrieve from those back to anywhere. We also have our C Media Cloud service. It's a completely cloud-based production collaboration suite of tools. So if you're familiar with like Media Silo or Frame.io, very similar product there, except we've got some direct integrations obviously into NavigatorX, but also some direct integrations with our cameras and some other things. So we have direct integration with our C Media Cloud platform. So the benefit there is that you could leverage some of their production collaboration tools in the cloud, and you can still bridge that gap between on-premise and in the cloud. So I'm going to show you guys some hands-on demo now, but that gives you a general idea of what an on-premise cloud hybrid setup could look like. So up on my screen here, what you're seeing here is this is NavigatorX. NavigatorX is a completely HTML5 based tool, so for your end users, it doesn't matter what platform they're on. They can be on a Mac, a PC, Linux. They're going to hit it from their web browser. The benefit there is that you don't have to install client software on all of your machines. When it comes time to do updates, you don't have to worry about updating 30 machines. You're just going to update the one core NavigatorX server, and it'll be completely transparent to your end users. So you're going to access it from an HTML5 interface here. We've tried to keep the interface extremely simple so that your users aren't spending hours and hours trying to figure out the tool. Rather, they can jump right in and it'll be fairly familiar to them. So just quickly, as far as the UI goes, this is the asset manager screen. This is where you'd spend, majority of your time in the system. On the left-hand side, you've got your tree panel, which allows you to build what we call bins. These are kind of like virtual folders that you can organize your content into. The nice thing about that is if you already have an existing file system and maybe you're organizing content just, somewhere on NAS storage, you can replicate those folders as bins inside of the system. That way, for your end users, it's a familiar way for them to find the content when you're transitioning them over to using a MAM. On the right-hand side, you've got your metadata panel. So you can create your own custom metadata schemas where you can put in string fields, date fields, Boolean fields to basically add metadata to your content. We can import metadata from sidecar, XML, or CSV files. Additionally, any technical metadata that's associated with your assets. So any embedded metadata on your photos or videos, any EXIF metadata, all of that metadata is brought into the system as well so that you can search against that. So, for your audio, video information, for your video files, any EXIF metadata, like I said, for your images. So all of that metadata is going to get brought in. And what I'll show you guys a little bit later is you can actually...
Come from the camera.
Yeah, so that would come from the camera.
Come from any camera, whether it's a Sony
Yes.
camera or
Yeah.
a Canon camera?
Yep, any camera. So all of the cameras are going to embed a certain level of metadata in them. All of that technical metadata we can extract. And then additionally, if you have something like an EVS that is able to output an XML of the metadata that maybe somebody's entering in the truck, we can also bring in that sidecar XML and associate that with your assets as well.
Are you able to add details to that metadata?
Yes. Yep. So if you have, technical metadata or maybe that existing metadata from something like an EVS, you can always go back in after the fact and either populate metadata once the asset's already ingested. You can do it at the time of ingest, or what I'll show you guys in a little bit here is you can actually use AI to generate some metadata for you.
Is there a way to batch that as it comes in? Let's say I take 500 images of
Yep.
an event. I don't
Yep.
want to be going to every one of them and saying, okay, this is the event, this is the work order
Yeah.
number, I can hear the 500, batch this metadata.
Yep, absolutely. So at the time of ingest, if you're doing a large batch ingest, you can do your metadata there, or you can just come directly into the system. I could select a whole bunch of assets here. I could grab an entire bin or folder structure of assets and do a bulk edit. It's just that easy right from the side panel there. So extremely easy to edit metadata after the fact if you need to. As I was saying before, we do include our own Catalyst transcoder in the core if you don't have an existing third-party transcode device. So we include that as a part of the core, but we also support third-party transcode. And so whenever you're bringing your assets into the system, we're going to always generate some sort of proxy of your content. And so that proxy is what's going to allow you to obviously view your content in the system. So you have your proxy, and you have the ability to specify the quality level of that proxy. So if speed and maybe bandwidth is a concern, you can do a very low quality proxy like you're seeing here just for preview purposes. Or if you want something a little bit more rich that you can actually work with, you have the ability when you set up your system to specify what that proxy quality level is. So you can bump it up. Maybe you're going to edit with these proxies. You can bump that up so that you have a much higher quality proxy to work with. So you've got full control over that proxy quality. So I just jumped to the Essences tab here. So we're going to always maintain your original source asset. In this case, it was an MP4 source, but we're also going to generate that proxy like I was saying before. So the proxy is what's going to be viewable inside of the system. There are also ways you could work with it. You could export that proxy for editing if you wanted to. We also support what we call a mezzanine essence. Our proxies have to be H.264 proxies because we're working inside of a web browser, obviously, but you may not want to edit with an H.264 proxy. So with our mezzanine essence, you can generate some sort of edit house format. So if you wanted to edit in ProRes or maybe DNxHD or something thereof, you could also generate that mezzanine format on Ingest as well, so you can work with it. A couple of other things here in the system. This is the preview player here. This is frame accurate, so you can actually scrub here frame by frame. Also, your kind of standard NLE shortcuts work, so your JKL for scrubbing the timeline, I&O for setting in and outs. I can use my arrow keys to move frame by frame. And these in and out points are going to be very important for a few things. So one is you can do subclipping inside of the system. So if you had a 30-minute clip, you could very easily set an in and out point and create a subclip. And what that's going to do is that's going to trim that asset and create a new clip inside of the system. You can also create what would be kind of a virtual subclip. So you can add an event. So I can add a title here. I don't know if that's actually a horseshoe, but I'm going to call it one. But the nice thing about this is that you're not actually creating a new clip in your system that's going to, flood your library of assets. You're just creating a virtual metadata reference point. So in this case, I have this event title here. So, not only can I add this event and note that I can search against later, but say these, the in and out points get blown out, or say I'm doing a search, having that saved as an event is always going to get me right back to that point in time. So if you have maybe a 30-minute interview, you can add notes to different points of it. That way, when you're searching for that asset, not only are you going to find that asset, but it's going to take you right to that point in time where, whatever the note was that you made occurred. We also support subtitles in the system. So if you have any sort of subtitle files, whether it be a .sec or maybe a .srt, .vtt, you can import those assets into the system and they'll get translated into our subtitle events tab. And so again, this is fully indexed, fully searchable, so you can search against it. I can click through it if I wanted to, and again, it's going to take me right to that in and out point. Whatever was said, I can find that. You can also overlay it on the system here. NavigatorX also has a complete workflow orchestration engine built into it. And that's important because obviously once you get your assets into the system, you're going to want to do things with them. You're going to want to move those assets around, maybe do archives, maybe distribution of your assets. And so we have a full workflow orchestration engine. So when you get NavigatorX, you have some pre-built workflows that are already available to you, things like archive workflows, distribution workflows, mezzanine generation, proxy generation, workflows that are built into the system so that you don't have to actually do any extra work. You can just use our pre-configured dialog boxes to create those new workflows. But what's really cool here is we also have what we call our workflow editor. And this is a visual editor where you can visually build your workflows. So without the need for engineering or custom scripting, you can very quickly grab the operations that would be inside of your workflow here. And just very easily, you can drag and drop those. You can connect them up here. You can configure any of the settings here on the right-hand side. And what's really powerful about this is not only the fact that it's super easy to build your workflows, but you can also build logic into your workflows. So I can drop a conditional branch here, and I can say based on, I'm just going to connect this up. Based on some sort of a condition or maybe multiple conditions, either go one way with my workflow or maybe go another way with my workflow. So instead of wasting resources and running all of your assets through a linear workflow, you can get a little bit smarter and preserve your resources and build some logic into your workflows. So it makes it really easy to start building very complex workflows without the need for engineering or third-party development. And that's built right into our workflow editor. So a couple of things I want to show you now. One is our integration with our C Media Cloud platform. And the reason why I want to show this to you is because this will give you an idea of how you can build kind of a hybrid setup, working in the cloud, but also working on-prem. The cloud is amazing because it's super cheap as far as storage is concerned. Obviously, you can access it from anywhere in the world securely. But obviously, you can't hook up the cloud in a lot of cases to your on-prem infrastructure. In a lot of cases, we have investments into NAS storage or maybe on-premise archive. You still want to utilize that as well. So with NavX and C, you can create that sort of a hybrid scenario like I was talking about before. And there's three main points to our integration with our C Media Cloud. The first one is using the cloud as an ingest endpoint. And what I mean by that is C is a cloud-based service. So as an example, this is the C interface here. It's basically, you have an online repository that you can store assets in, but they have some tools for review and approval. You can collaborate and annotate on videos or images if you wanted to. They have a lot of tools for that sort of collaboration in the cloud. But what you can do is you could actually have somebody out in the field and they could be uploading directly into C using just a laptop out in the field and maybe an LTE hotspot. They can be uploading directly into C. And if I come back to NavigatorX here, I can actually, if I come into my settings here, what you'll see is I have that workspace that I just showed you, that C workspace that we were just looking at, that's here. I can actually automatically sync the assets from that workspace into my on-premise system. So again, the power there is you could have somebody out in the field with a laptop. They could be uploading assets to the cloud to C, while they're out doing their production, and those assets could be making it back to your facility in real time, where your editors can start working with those assets even before they finish shooting. And I have the ability to specify if I want to shoot a master, a proxy, if I want to sync a master, a proxy, or a thumbnail. So if bandwidth is a concern or speed is a concern, I can just sync my proxy and my thumbnail. If I have the bandwidth and the time, I can sync the full master if I wanted to. So you could have somebody just sitting, out remotely with their laptop uploading. C also has a very cool feature called a file request. So I could create a new file request, and maybe I'm working with an external contributor. I don't want to give them access into my on-premise system. Maybe I don't even want to give them credentials into C because it's just a one-off. Maybe they're just going to send me a couple of clips that I'm going to use in something. I can create a file request here, and I say, I can send this file request to their email. I can require them to enter certain metadata, and they'll basically get an email that says, Robert has requested these shoot clips. They'll click that link. It'll take them to their browser where they can upload. And so instead of the workflow today where, I'm sure a lot of you do this, you get a Dropbox link, you've got to download the files from Dropbox, you've got to look at them, see if they're good, then you've got to actually ingest them into your MAM. Well, in this case, as soon as they get that file request, they can upload to that file request. And because we can automatically pull the assets down from the cloud, you can have that content automatically make it into your system with that required metadata. And then another cool thing you can do is with our own Sony cameras, a lot of them have Wi-Fi built in to the cameras and the ability to upload to C. So either using Wi-Fi or using an LTE dongle, you can actually have our cameras push proxies directly up to C. So I have our Z280 camera here, so I'm just going to shoot a quick 5-second clip here in the room, okay? And so what's going to happen is in real time, I'm connected to the Wi-Fi, but again, this could be LTE. I've been in the field with this before where I'm just hooking it up to the hotspot on my phone. And in real time, it's going to push that proxy up to the cloud. So if I come back to C and I go to my camera uploads folder here, let's see, so the proxy has just finished uploading. So you'll see that's the proxy there that's about to get processed. So it's already hit the cloud. And as soon as that finishes processing, it's going to get pulled down into NavigatorX. So if you already see that clip is starting to come down here. So once that finishes processing, I'm automatically going to pull that proxy down. So think about that. You could have somebody out in the field shooting, and while they're still shooting, before they even get back in their car to come back to the facility, your proxies can actually be back on-prem, back at your facility where you can start editing. And then when they get back with the camera or with the high-res, you can just sync that up in your edit, and you're already done by the time they make it back with your cameras. So let's see here if that finished processing. So still processing. But yeah, you can see the asset is coming in already. If there was any metadata that I had input into the camera that went up to C, that metadata would come through as well. So you can create you can use the cloud as an ingest endpoint for your system. Additionally, you can use the cloud for distribution. So Again, because the cloud is outside of your network, one of the great things is that you can access it from anywhere in the world without needing to give, VPN access or tunneling in via SSH or something like that. So you can use the cloud as a distribution endpoint. So what I could do here is I could grab, assets. These could be assets sitting on NAS storage. These could be assets that are maybe sitting on LTO or somewhere else, maybe even sitting in a different physical location. Maybe we're here in Virginia and they're sitting on a library in our Los Angeles location. I can grab those assets, come up here to my distribution workflows, which I've already created. And I've got two options when I'm working with C. I can distribute to a C workspace. And what that's going to do is that's just going to upload those files directly to C. And then anybody who has access to C, anybody who has C credentials, they're going to get a notification that there's new content. They can log into C. They can access that content. They can view that content. Like I was saying before, they've got some great collaboration tools for like review and approval, annotation, collaboration in the cloud. So anybody who has access to C, you could just do that distribution to a C workspace and they would have access. We have a lot of customers that use that to create kind of small silos for maybe different business units in their company. Their marketing group, they may not want them to have full access to their MAM, but they use a C workspace as kind of a silo where when they get requests for content, they'll create that content, or maybe they already have it in their library. They'll just distribute it to that C workspace, and then that team can just log into C and pull any of the content that they need or work with it. You can also initiate from inside of NavX a C media box. And a C media box will allow you to distribute content externally without actually even the need to log into C. So very much like what a Dropbox link is today. So if I were to come into here and create a media box from within C, you've got options to create different types of media boxes. I could do a public one where anyone who has the link could open that content. I could do a protected one with a password, or secure where they actually need C credentials. I can give them access to actually download the source files, not download the source files. I can do things like watermarking. And again, they're just going to get a link to that media box where they can view that content, work with that content, maybe download that content. But now, with the integration between C and NavigatorX, you can initiate that media box from directly within NavX. So again, whether those assets are sitting on NAS storage, maybe they're sitting somewhere on archive, maybe they're already in the cloud, but you're just working inside of NavX. Maybe they're in a different physical location. NavX is kind of that bridge to your content. So you can initiate that media box. NavX will take care of pulling that content back from whatever location it might be, pushing it up to the cloud, and then initiating that C media box that'll get sent out to that external contributor. So you can use the cloud as a distribution endpoint. And then the last main integration point between NavigatorX and C is archive. So NavigatorX, as a workflow orchestrator, has the ability to manage archive on-premise, like I said. So optical disk archive or LTO, NavX can manage those. But with the integration with C, now you can also archive into the cloud, which is extremely cost-effective. C is based on top of AWS, so they leverage Amazon Glacier for archive. I think right now it's about $4 per terabyte per month for archive in Glacier, which is extremely cheap storage. So with the integration here, I can grab my assets, I can set a rule maybe to automatically archive over a certain period of time and automate that a bit, but I can archive up to C. And NavX is going to take those assets, push them up to the cloud, and then archive them. And I can either, just do archive and leave my master essence online, where I'm basically just creating a backup in the cloud, or I can actually take my master essence offline. So what that would do is that's actually going to clear up space on your nearline storage, put that master essence, that big heavy file up in the cloud. But because your proxies are always going to remain online, all of these assets here with the yellow line, these have all been offline, meaning the master essence has been pushed up to the cloud. It's no longer on the local storage, but my proxies still remain online. So obviously I can still view my metadata, access my metadata. I can preview the proxy if I wanted to. I can export this proxy and just edit with that proxy if maybe the proxy is a high enough quality for maybe social distribution or going out to my online video provider. But if you want, NavigatorX will also orchestrate pulling that content back from archive. So you can do a full retrieval back from Amazon Glacier, or I can set an in and out point just like I would with an on-prem archive, and I can do a partial retrieval of that content. So I don't even need to pull back the entire asset. I can pull back just the in and out point that I want. So some great ways to work with the cloud and kind of build that sort of a hybrid setup.
What's the retrieval time cold storage?
Sure. So it's basically, we're using Glacier, so it's coming directly from Amazon. So a normal Amazon archive retrieve request, their SLA is 3 to 5 hours. I've seen it take a lot less than that, but that's what they have to say. They also have an expedited request, which is supposed to be 3 to 10 minutes. So depending on how fast you need the content back and what, you know, obviously there's cost associated with that. Yes. Yep. So you can do either or. Yep. So really cost-efficient way to, you know, store content long-term. Obviously, the benefit of being up in the cloud is that with AWS Glacier, it's replicated across different zones, so you don't have to worry about, you know, maybe a flood in your data center or something. It's gonna be safe because it's gonna be replicated in multiple locations. Any questions on cloud, on-prem, or anything that I've showed so far? Otherwise, I'm gonna get into some AI stuff. All right. So the last thing I want to show you guys is AI for automated metadata enrichment. So obviously when it comes to a MAM, ours, or any of the other ones on the market, the big key is metadata. If you don't have metadata, you can't find your assets. Your MAM winds up becoming just a closet that you basically shove stuff into. You have no idea what's in the closet, and you know it's kind of a crapshoot. So metadata is obviously the key, but it's also the hardest thing. It takes a long time. You've got to dedicate somebody to do it. People hate doing it. And so usually, you know, when it comes to workflows and you're looking for things to trim and get rid of, metadata is the unfortunate casualty, and usually people just stop doing it. So the great thing about AI is that now you can use AI to generate some of that metadata that you would normally have humans input. So we're doing AI right now inside of NavX in 3 different ways. And let me just log back in here. So we're doing AI for object detection. So identifying things like people or cars or cups or any objects within your scenes. Identifying objects. Optical character recognition. So you're probably familiar with OCR. It's been around for years for things like handwritten PDFs, identifying handwritten text inside of images or documents. Well, we can also do that on video content. So now you can do that on, obviously, images in our system, but you can do that on video content. So if you think about it, you know, you have all this legacy content that has lower thirds in it, or it has, you know, maybe something like this, where you've recorded somebody doing a presentation, and the text that's on my screen, you can index that text and make it searchable. We're also doing speech to text. So if you don't have your own closed caption files, you can use the AI engine to generate those closed caption files for you, so that not only can you search against that audio, but you can also export that and use it maybe downstream, maybe for publishing to social where you need a closed caption file. So I'll show you some examples of that. First is object detection. So if I come into this asset here, I've used the AI engine to generate all the objects in the scene. And it's not just a comma separated list of objects. You're going to find a lot of systems that just put objects in a comma separated list. That's great. That's going to get you to the asset. But what we do is we actually translate those objects into events in our system. So as I was showing you before, where those events store those in and out points, same thing here. Not only is the AI engine telling us the objects in the scene, but it's telling us exactly where it is. So not only am I going to find that there's a bird in the scene and find this overall clip, but I can get right to the point in time where that object is actually in the scene so that I can quickly find it. So you can use AI for some metadata object detection. We're also doing, like I said, optical character recognition. So we can analyze any of that text. That could be, you know, motion graphic text. That could be lower thirds. That could be maybe something on somebody's shirt, a logo. So as you're seeing, we're identifying the text within the scene. And then if you look down at the bottom where our events are, that's getting translated into searchable metadata here. And again, not only translating that into searchable metadata, but maintaining those in and out points so that you can find exactly where that text is displayed in your assets. So this is actually probably the favorite amongst our customers right now is the OCR, because for all that legacy content, a lot of times, you've put lower thirds into something. So instead of tagging it with somebody's name, you just use the OCR to identify their name, and now that's searchable. And you don't have to have somebody go back and re-tag everything. And then the last piece is speech to text. So transcribing any of that audio that's in your files. Not only transcribing it, but like I said before, translating that into our subtitle events area here, so that if you want, you can overlay it on the video for playback. But again, this all becomes searchable. And now this is actually a closed caption file. So you could actually export this. If I come into my essences here, I could actually download that, and now I can use that downstream. Maybe maybe I'm going to publish this video to Facebook. I can take the AI generated closed caption file, upload that with this video to Facebook, and now I've got my closed caption files already generated without having to have somebody do that if I don't have the time or resources. Any questions on NavX AI or using the cloud? I know we've got a wrap here pretty soon.
This can handle all types of files?
That's correct. So NavX is file agnostic. So obviously we've got workflows built for your media. Your video and your audio and images have specific workflows for those. And we support the full range of cameras, not just Sony cameras. But it is file agnostic. So you can ingest any type of file you want into the system. And specifically with documents, actually, if you're ingesting any sort of PDF, Microsoft Office document, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, maybe a text file, when you ingest those text files, we actually index the text content of them as well. So you're not just searching against the actual file name and maybe the metadata that you've associated with it, but you're actually searching the text content of those files. So you could, we have some customers that they'll have, shot sheets or scripts in Microsoft Word. And what they'll do is they'll associate those assets with their media files. You've got this relations tab here. And so I could come in here and associate, a document with my file. That way, if I find, that Microsoft Word script using, something inside of the script, I can jump to the relations tab on that script and say, okay, here's all my video assets that are related to that. So you can actually use, some of those production documents as contextual metadata to find your assets.
What about security?
So security is another big one. NavigatorX is primarily on-premise, so it's going to sit within your firewall. So you can, lock off your firewall, and anybody inside of your WAN is going to be able to access it, no problem. We have a full permission schema in here, so you can permission not only functions within the system, so what areas of NavX people can get to, what workflows they can execute or not execute. You have permissions over those functions, but you also have permission over what content they can actually see in the system. So you have full permissioning inside of the system. We also support authentication against Active Directory if you're using Active Directory currently. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Obviously, we've got our booth outside, so if you guys want to see anything further or have any questions, feel free to stop by. Thank you.
Thanks.